Hi, everybody, and welcome to Love Fraud Live. Sociopaths do not burn out. Even as senior citizens, they keep exploiting and manipulating. The only difference is that their victims are also typically older. So, if your older relatives get targeted, how can you protect them? I'm Donna Anderson, author of lovefraud.com and host of the True Lovefraud Stories podcast. After betrayal by a sociopath, I help you to understand what happened, put down the emotional burden, and move forward with your life. Tonight, I'll offer 28 detailed tips on protecting your senior relatives, or anyone else for that matter, from being exploited by sociopaths. At the end of this short presentation, I'll answer your questions, so please be sure to subscribe to Love Fraud Live. You'll be notified about all of my upcoming YouTube videos. Okay, let's get started. Multiple Love Fraud readers have contacted me about their parents who were targeted by sociopaths. One woman described how a female sociopath latched on to her recently widowed father, took over his life, and tried to hasten his demise. This woman shared tips for protecting older relatives from sociopaths and gold diggers that she and her family learned the hard way. I included these tips in my book, which is called Senior Sociopaths: How to Recognize and Escape Lifelong Abusers. My research shows that sociopaths after the age of 50 will not get better, and they will likely get worse. So following are the 28 tips for protecting relatives should they marry a sociopath or a gold digger. Now, these tips are pretty detailed, so if you want to review them, you can find the information in an article on lovefraud.com. There's a link in the window below the video. Here we go. Tip number 1. Immediately hire a private investigator to do a background check. You should verify the person's marriage status, divorces, careers, credit, bankruptcies, court records, previous lawsuits, businesses, property ownership, and the names of their children and siblings. You could investigate this yourself, but it takes a lot longer and you may not be aware of the places that you need to search. Here's tip number 2. The new spouse will probably be estranged from his, her, or her own family and claim that they are bipolar, crazy, dead, ill, or live out of state. Find these family members anyway and contact them as soon as possible. They'll actually be grateful that you called and will tell you all about the sociopath's true nature. The ex, in particular, will tell you exactly what you are up against. Here's tip number 3. Educate yourself as well as everyone in your family about this disorder. Knowing the sociopath's modus operandi and the red flags will help a lot. Also know that behind closed doors, your relative will be continuously subjected to all their devious behavior. When you know how sociopaths think and behave, it helps you to preempt them. Here's tip number 4. Make a written and photographic inventory of every item that your relative owned prior to associating with the sociopath, and be sure to include brand names. This will prove the item's existence and condition when the new spouse breaks it or claims it as their own later on. Also, copy or scan all your family photos and keep them in a safe place, as they will disappear or be destroyed. Find some pretext to get a hold of the keepsakes, heirlooms, and mementos, and replace them with fakes if necessary. Here's tip number 5. Copy the sociopath's address book or contact list. This will be invaluable when you begin exposing them. Tip number 6. Record all passwords to all your relatives' accounts. You can then keep an eye on the accounts and know if they're being drained. Tip number 7. Never believe a single word that the sociopath says, no matter how charming, gracious, or supportive they seem to be. However, to the sociopath, pretend you believe them wholeheartedly. Maintain a polite, friendly demeanor and flatter them. Why? Because they will look for any excuse to blacklist you. Here's tip number 8. 98% of what the sociopath tells you is completely fabricated. So always covertly check up on their stories and question the veracity of their claims. Communicate regularly, openly, and most importantly, directly with family and friends rather than through the disordered spouse. The sociopath will seek to create mistrust and division by lying to you about others. This is how they destroy relationships and gain control over incoming and outgoing information. The sociopath's ultimate goal is to have total control over your relative. Here's tip number 9. Record every conversation that you have with the sociopath. This is very important. Never let the sociopath know that you are aware of what they are doing, but instead act very impressed by their grandiose claims. Then ask innocent leading questions like when, where, why, and how, and record all the answers. Then get transcripts of those conversations. Here's tip number 10. Never confide in the sociopath or divulge any personal information or feelings about yourself or anyone in the family. It will be used in a smear campaign against you. So be dull and uninteresting in their presence, minimizing one-on-one conversations. When they ask questions about you or your family, be vague and forgetful or change the subject. Here's tip number 11. Refrain from emotional displays such as tears, anxiety, disappointment, anger, hurt, or fear, as that tells the sociopath what upsets you and how to hurt you further. And here's number 12. Whenever you deal with them, be cool, calm, and businesslike. Show no fear or weakness, and never apologize to them or beg and plead with them. When the sociopath creates drama or pressures you for an immediate response to any issue, always say that you will think about it and get back to them. Here's tip number 13. Always have another person or relative present whenever you visit. That way, everything can be verified by your witness. Here's number 14, and this is my favorite. Wear sunglasses. The sociopath will claim it is extremely rude and bad-mannered. The real problem is that it makes it more difficult for them to read facial cues. And here's number 15. Never let the sociopath mind your house, pets, or children. The sociopath will snoop and rifle through every drawer and paper. They will also use this as an opportunity to covertly pit your children against each other and against you. Here's number 16. Make sure that either you, other family members, or the family lawyer or accountant have medical and financial power of attorney for your relative. Keep these documents in a safe place. At some stage, the sociopath will try to gain control over this for their own personal gain. Now, here's number 17. If you suspect that the sociopath is cheating in the relationship, tail them, or have your friends or a private detective do it. If possible, obtain photographs of the liaison. Install a tracking device on their car. Here's tip number 18. If the sociopath ever wants you or your family to sign or witness anything, insist on reading all the fine print in the document first. If they pull the line, "Don't you trust me?" just smile and say you trust them implicitly, but that you always read the fine print first, as you only want what is best for them and you would never forgive yourself if they were defrauded in any way. Never be bullied with the excuse that it is urgent. Here's tip number 19. Never let the sociopath have access to you or your family's computer, email, address book, financial records, etc. And tip number 20. Never finance, bankroll, or become a business partner in any of their ventures. They will certainly swindle you or bankrupt you. Here's tip number 21. Never rely on the sociopath's hearsay as to what a doctor, lawyer, accountant, policeman, or pastor has said. Deal directly with these people to verify. And then obtain your own copy of any documentation and keep it in a safe place. Here's tip number 22. Remember that sociopaths fear being exposed. They do not want the truth about them to be known. So keep records of every interaction: who, what, where, and why. Events, actions, words spoken, and the date and time and place of the events. This will confirm your recollections against the warped story that they'll tell. So build up an arsenal of evidence with documents, recordings, texts, emails, letters, and transcripts. Tip number 23, always stay in touch with your relative, despite the sociopath's efforts to keep you away. Let the relative know that you support and care about them, and you are waiting to help at any time. Here's tip number 24. Love to a sociopath means ownership and control. Your relative belongs to them. The sociopath loves your relative in proportion to how much they can use your relative. Their loyalty ends where the benefits stop. When sociopaths lose their grip or control over someone, the mask will drop and you will get to experience their full-on rage. So here's tip number 25. Covertly videotape their rages. In fact, you may want to install a nanny cam to find out how they treat your relative when you aren't there. Here's tip number 26. Keep copies of your relatives' birth certificates, driver's license, bank accounts, passport, loan documents, and car registration in a safe place. Back up everything on your computer. And here's tip number 27. Find an aggressive pit bull lawyer as soon as you suspect that the new spouse is a sociopath or gold digger. This lawyer must have experience in dealing with sociopaths who swindle senior citizens. Protect your relative's will and check it regularly, as the new spouse will try to make themselves the sole beneficiary. If you're involved with legal proceedings, know that the sociopath does not play by the rules. And finally, here's tip number 28. Remember that the more charming the sociopath is, the more suspicious you need to be. So, these terrific tips were provided by a love fraud reader. She and her family actually had to deal with a sociopath who tried to take over her elderly father's life. Again, if you want to review them, read the article on lovefraud.com. There is a link in the window below this video. So, that's the presentation for tonight. If you're dealing with the unfathomable behavior of a psychopath, antisocial, or narcissist, either towards yourself or a relative, reach out to me. I can help you to understand what happened, put down the emotional burden, and move forward. For more information, please visit lovefraud.com/talk to Donna. So now I'll answer your questions. Please type your comments and questions into the chat, and feel free to ask me anything, whether it's related to this discussion of how to protect your senior relatives or on any other topic. Okay. All right. So while I'm waiting for questions, I wrote this book. It came out 3 years ago. And the inspiration of the book, Senior Sociopaths, was because there was this general perception in the mental health field that sociopaths burn out or get mellow out as they get older, like after the age of 40. In fact, there are 2 psychiatry textbooks that I found that made this claim, that the sociopaths just, become less exploitative as they get older. Well, this made no sense to me because my ex-husband was 50 years old when I met him, and he certainly exploited me, and then after I got rid of him, he exploited other women after that. So he never stopped. So I wanted to collect data about this, and so I surveyed Love Fraud readers about the sociopaths that they knew who were age 50 or older. I wanted to get some input on exactly what their experiences were. And a total of 2,120 people responded to the surveys. And of that group, 40% knew the person that they were talking about, both before and after the age of 50. So I asked the question, did this person mellow out, burn out, or engage in less manipulation, deceit, or antisocial behavior after the age of 50? And this turned out to be the most important finding of the book. So in answer to that question, 2% of people, only 2%, said that yes, the person engaged in less antisocial behavior. 7% said that they engaged in somewhat less antisocial behavior. 39% said that their behavior was the same, both before and after age 50. And the biggest percentage, 52%, actually said that the manipulation, deceit, and antisocial behavior got worse after the age of 50. So if you add them up, that means that 91% of the survey respondents said that the sociopath was just as bad or worse after age 50. So this is very important to understand, because if no matter what involvement you may have with a sociopath, whether it's a partner or a parent or a relative or a business colleague or just a neighbor, you need to know that whatever behavior you're seeing that looks like sociopathic behavior, there's a really, really, really good chance that as this person gets older, it will stay the same, be just as bad, or get worse. And so when you're figuring out how you're going to deal with the situation, you need to understand that. You can't be waiting and hoping for someone to change. I know that I've spoken to quite a few people who were in long-term relationships, long-term marriages, 20, 30, and 40 years, and they just kept hoping and praying that the person will change. Well, it's not going to happen. So, you need to factor that into making your decisions about what you're going to do. So, in the book, I have chapters on many different types of relationships. I talk, of course, about romantic partners. That's the most information I have about that. But I also have a chapter on spouses, romantic partners, meaning dating relationships, and then spouses. So altogether, that's probably about half of the people that filled out the survey were in that situation. But people also told me about their parents, their siblings and other relatives, neighbors and work colleagues. And so, there's a lot of information, and essentially, regardless of what the relationship was, the finding that they continued to be abusive and antisocial, that applied across the board. So towards the end of the book, I also have a chapter on how to deal with these senior sociopaths, and that's where my list of tips is at the end of the book. And along with the book, since I had so much great data, I also published a scientific paper that was in a peer-reviewed journal. I was really proud of that because it was new information for the scientific field. And my paper is often being cited by other people who are writing about antisocials and psychopaths and sociopaths. So that's pretty cool. And I also just was notified, I have the paper is posted on a website called ResearchGate, which is where scientists of all kinds of disciplines post their work. And so I was just notified that my paper had gotten 1,000 reads. So 1,000 people have downloaded it from that particular website to take a look at it, which is really cool because that means the information is getting out there. So Shiny for Him says, hoping they will change is what keeps so many people bound for longer than they should. And yes, that absolutely is the case. And it was fed by this general information that, people will mellow out when they get older. And that was the whole reason why I wrote the book. But another factor, another thing that goes on, especially with people who were married while young, which I have data on that too, because the people who married young made out the worst, because they spent so much time with these people. But anyway, when you marry while you're kind of young and you have children and you have a family and you have a career and you're doing you're busy. And then eventually you get to the point, age 50 or later, where you're retiring. And a lot of people just had this idea is that, okay, it's been difficult now, but, once we retire, it will be better. Well, it doesn't happen. The sociopath, if you're involved with a sociopath all this time, this person is just as bad or worse as when you were young. And then the other thing that happens, which is really scary, which is why you really need to understand this, is that, should you get later on in life and your health isn't that good, which happens a lot when you're dealing with a sociopath because the trauma and the tension, constant tension, all those years of tension, all those years of your cortisol being elevated, it wears you down physically. So you can get towards the end of your life and be in need of physical care. And I have heard horror stories about how sociopaths treated their spouses at that stage of life. So it's really important that, and in fact, I remember one of the quotes in my book about someone who had decided to divorce a sociopath said, I need to do it now before I'm in a wheelchair, which is true, because you need to do it while you can, because this person is not going to care for you when you truly need it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And next week, I have my special guest next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Dr. Liane Leedom is going to be with us, and we're going to be talking about mind control and gaslighting, which is exactly what sociopaths do all the time. So also, please be sure to check out the True Lovefraud Stories podcast, and that's where survivors tell their own outrageous stories of betrayal. And I also interview experts on the issues that are raised in the stories. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube or YouTube Music, or at lovefraud.com/podcasts. Finally, please subscribe to Love Fraud Live. When you do, you'll automatically be notified about all my new videos. Plus, by subscribing, you help to boost the distribution of this show, so that helps to spread the word about all the dangerous sociopaths who live among us and don't get any better as they get old. So you'll find also many helpful links in the window below this video. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.